Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream. Change has come to America.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
Oh, yes, it's much worse. I used to hear things about how Ryan's was trying to rein people in. You know, there are so many people who feel very comfortable about, oh, I have walk-in privileges. Oh, I don't have to answer to Ryan's, even though really technically they're under his umbrella. Ryan's had a hard time reining people in. And traditionally how it would go before, you would have the chief of staff who would deal with the day-to-day operations and everyone else, to include the domestic policy advisor, NSC, all of these people, senior advisors, would come under the chief of staff to figure out the nuances. If they had any disagreements, would work it out. If they had any differences in policy, they would all do this markup, and then the chief of staff would look at it and then present it to the president. What you have now is everybody just running to the president. I don't like him. I don't like her. Did you hear this? Did you hear that? It's just a hot mess from what I'm hearing.
Really?
It's nothing that we've seen before. And it would be very interesting, Brian, to see how General Kelly brings in this staff, reins in this staff. I mean, we even heard that Kellyanne told people stop calling the president by his first name. I mean, it's so far gone that they feel like he's like just his friend. This is the leader of the free world. The office of the presidency holds it's basically sacred in politics, and people are treating it like it's everyday, it's common. But it will be interesting to see how the general reins this in, and then also to see Scaramucci on this side. Typically, under a traditional structure, Scaramucci would come up under the general. So I want to see how that dynamic plays.
Right. Richard Wolff, last word to you on this topic. We were listening to all the stories, all the news events that happened this week. Is there an element of distraction here? That's always the question about President Trump. When he replaces Priebus, when he tweets about transgender policy, is there a designed distraction going on?
So people have suggested that's the case, but I actually think it's more of a sign of the president being distracted. This isn't an intentional play. There's no rhyme or reason to it. He announces the transgender and the change of policy there, and the Pentagon doesn't know about it. So if there was something planned about this distraction, then it's not clear who's doing the planning and why nobody else knows. I think this is a distracted president. He's watching TV all day, and there's a live commentary of what he feels about his coverage. That seems to be his driving force about what he's doing most in office. The rest of it is a random play. Scaramucci's meltdown came because of the public disclosure of his public disclosure forms.
Right.
There is no intent here. There is just a reactive, scattershot approach. Yeah, it takes our attention. It's fascinating for us to watch, and it detracts completely for anything like an agenda.
It's so true, and that's why nothing will happen, and nothing can happen, and we can't move forward. We can't fix Obamacare. God help us if we go to war, because the first casualty of war is the truth, and we don't even have that. There is a man in the White House who cannot manage the White House, and if he can't manage the White House, how is he going to manage Congress? Okay, you've got 535 people, all with their own view of what should happen to the exchanges, or what should happen to Medicare, or what should happen to Medicaid. I mean, he can't manage the West Wing. Okay, the West Wing. It's just one small portion of what is in his portfolio. Okay, and April Ryan is sitting there going, Kellyanne Conway doesn't want them to call him by his first name. How about stop calling him Dad? Dad? There's the problem. I mean, this is a small family boutique business built on a $100 million inheritance. That is what Trump has. He has no business acumen. He has no managerial skills. He has no a talent, except that he's a reality TV star, and he's turning the White House into the Real Housewives of D.C. is what he's doing. I mean, if you can't manage your own White House, if you can't manage the West Wing, how in the world do we expect him to manage the Justice Department? How does he manage the State Department? How does he manage the Energy Department? How does he manage Congress? How does he manage anything? Anything? The answer is he doesn't, and he can't. And we have 3 branches of government, and 2 of them are a disaster. Congress is a mess because there is no leadership from the president on any piece of legislation. any policy position because President Trump doesn't have any policy positions. He just wants to win. Everything's about winning with him. He just wants to win. So that's why he had this little White House garden party after just the House of Representatives passed a bill so heinous that they wouldn't let it be scored before they voted yes. And then after it was scored, we found out it would throw 23 million people off of their health insurance. When he had his little garden party, he had no idea what was in that bill, and that's why he celebrated it. And that's why he said, these are some hardworking people. These are amazing, magnificent bastards, this House of Representatives. And then as soon as it got scored by the CBO and it was a loser, he said it's a mean bill. It's a mean son of a bitch. Throwing all those people in the House of Representatives who all have to run for re-election under the proverbial bus. That bill was so bad, it was a non-starter in the Senate. A complete and utter non-starter. You had press conferences last week saying it's a fraud, it's a disaster, it's a sham, it's not. I vote yes. I mean, Lindsay, I don't know what's wrong with you. But I mean, you had all this happening last week and he still had an epic failure. This is a man who was given the keys to the kingdom and not just the presidency. He's got a Republican House. He's got a Republican Senate. By all counts, he's got a Republican Supreme Court. His executive orders are failing in courts. His legislation that isn't even his because he doesn't bother. He's too busy watching Fox and Friends and tweeting about it and showing his utter weakness and neediness every freaking 5 seconds shortly after the crack of dawn. He wakes up needy. He goes to bed needy. So he's got this amazing record of failure on everything from his Muslim ban to the Affordable Care Act to replace, to repeal, nothing, no jobs bill, no infrastructure bill, nothing. Nothing can happen because the executive branch can't control itself, let alone control all the other moving parts that come under the president. His cabinet is a mess, okay? I mean, you got Rex Tillerson threatening to resign. Probably because of the Russia sanctions, which is a failure by President Trump. You've got the Senate and the House voting overwhelmingly to put new sanctions, never mind take the old ones, to put new sanctions on Russia. And they did it by a veto-proof majority. An idiot boy has to tell us whether or not he's going to sign it? What, you really want your first veto to A, be Russian sanctions, and B, be overridden by your own party's Congress? So people, they're writing on my Facebook page, well, if he's so pro-Russia, why is he going to sign the Russian sanction bill? Because if he doesn't, his veto will be overridden, and then that's another hashtag fail of a week. He has no choice. He can't control his Congress. He can't control anything. And now you got his pick hit for the press corps. Didn't even make it to a paying job. He was just an intern. Sold his freaking company to a Chinese government conglomerate. It now faces a vote from CFIUS, which is his cabinet. It's the Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury. All these people have to review the sale of this hedge fund to a Chinese government conglomerate for to see whether or not it poses a problem for our defense, if it's a problem for our national security, is it a problem for our economy? Everybody's got to sign off on it. It's the same as the uranium deal, okay? And you singled out Hillary Clinton as being the one who gave American uranium to the Russians, which was a complete and utter fabrication of Breitbart, okay? It was a Canadian uranium company. It was sold to the Russians here in the United States, and even that got reviewed by the cabinet. Even that got reviewed by CFIUS. They approved it. All of them approved it. But now Scaramucci's company has to go through that same damn process, and he's insulted everybody. So I don't know, but you've got people writing opinion pieces, op-eds all over the newspapers this weekend. Washington Post, Wall Street Journal. Oh my God, the Wall Street Journal opinion page is the most right-leaning opinion page in the history of newspapers. And that's where Peggy Noonan wrote her piece that said, Trump is Woody Allen without the humor. Meaning he's neurotic. He's a complete and utter neurotic. He can't control himself, but he's not funny. It's like last night I was watching the history of comedy on CNN, right? And they had all the madness of comedy, all the people who we've lost because, being that neurotic or that needy or that, chasing the high of love, of audience love, can actually drive you crazy because you get a high from all the love that, pours over the stage lights into your heart when you're on stage. But sooner or later, you're going to have to get off the stage and then you're just left with yourself. And if you're depressed or needy or wanting, it doesn't fill you up. You've got this big dark hole inside you. You're going to fill it up with either drugs, alcohol, or depression. Straight out, flat up depression, and you're going to off yourself. Phil Hartman they left out last night, which really kind of upset me because that was just the most incredibly sad story. But they did Robin Williams last night and Jonathan Winters last night, and you don't even realize Belushi was only 33 years old. Richard Pryor, all these people. But this is what Trump is. He is that without the comedy, without the art. The art of the deal has no art. The art of the deal is fraud. Rip people off. Stiff them. Turn your back on them after they have been loyal to you and performed the work. He is the most disloyal person in the world, demanding ultimate loyalty from everybody, including Comey. And this is why Comey was fired. And this is what Comey said. That's why he said he was fired.
Let me move to the January 27th dinner, where you said, quote, the president began by asking me whether I wanted to stay on as FBI director. He also indicated that lots of people, again your words, wanted the job. You go on to say that the dinner itself was seemingly an effort to, quote, have you ask him for your job and create some sort of, quote unquote, patronage relationship. The president seems, from my reading of your memo, to be holding your job or your possibility of continuing in your job over your head in a fairly direct way. What was your impression and what did you mean by this notion of a patronage relationship?
Well, my impression, and again, it's my impression, I could always be wrong, but my common sense told me that what was going on is either he had concluded or someone had told him that you've already asked Comey to stay and you didn't get anything for it.
Oh.
And that the dinner was an effort to build a relationship. In fact, he asked specifically of loyalty in the context of asking me to stay.
Now, here is a man who demands all this loyalty and gives none in return. That is a very sad figure. That is a dangerous man. That is a man who is not sure of himself. I mean, this is, by the way, General Kelly, it's just been reported today, called James Comey after Trump fired him to express his outrage, his anger over the firing of James Comey. He called Comey and he said he was considering resigning himself. And, James Comey, how did he learn about his firing? This is why that question from Judy, did he tell Reince, that he was fired? Remember, Comey learned that he was fired on the TV. The TV news was in the background. He was addressing a workforce of the FBI in Los Angeles, and it came across as breaking news that he'd been fired, And so when he was traveling back to Washington, General Kelly called him, and Comey told Kelly not to resign. He said, we have too few good people there. They need as many as they can get. I don't know you all that well, but, your record is one of service. Just stay there. You've got to, be a check on this guy. This guy is, and they're not close friends or anything. This was not a friendship thing. They barely knew each other. I mean, he was at his first cabinet meeting today with Kelly, and they asked him about North Korea, and he said, We'll handle North Korea. We handle everything. Only I alone can fix it. I am your voice. I mean, this man is deranged, okay? He's needy. He's crude, he's inexperienced, and he's a coward. It's not a good thing in a president. And he's blackmailable.
RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.